He said, good. I wouldn't go to church. Did you expect me to contribute? Survived that test. I'm very happy. So that worked out really well. So we had all those wonderful things. It was kind of the year, you know, guys parachuting into the parking lot and dump tanks and all that stuff. It was part of the mode of doing things in those days, but it had a purpose. And the purpose was to come here 35 years later and tell you stories that you find amusing. Oh, I'm going to do that. But that wasn't the purpose of any of that. The purpose was trying to lead people to the foot of the cross. To see lives changed through the power of the simple truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And there were people who were saved, and the district superintendent has already told you some folks have gone from the churchhood into the ministry and other kind of things that have happened across the years that have been very heartwarming and very rewarding. And so thank you for the privilege of allowing us to be here during those days and for being here with you this day. It is warm memories we have of this place. Acts 28 tells a story around this kind of significant, I think, for us. So I want to talk to you about for just a few minutes this morning. It interrupts the story of the never-ending drama of the life of the Apostle Paul. The sort of unrelentingly unfolded his ministry and was drawing ever closer to a conclusion. He had been arrested by the Roman governor of the territory, whose name was Felix, and the high priest came to the town of Caesarea where Paul was being held, and he arrived at his arrogant, self-righteous best, and he brought his lawyer with him, a man named Tertullus, and they were going to examine or cross-examine Paul to find out what was going on. As a matter of fact, the governor lodged a fairly serious complaint about Paul when he said about him in Acts 24. He defined him as a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world, being a ringleader of a sect of the Nazarenes, and even trying to desecrate the temple. Or as Eugene Peterson cryptically put it in the Message, the translation called The Message, we have found this man time and again, disturbing the peace, stirring up riots against Jews all over the world, the ringleader of the seditious sect called Nazarenes. He's a real bad apple, I must say. We even caught him trying to defile our holy temple. So Paul was put under arrest. Relaxed house arrest, really, but he was there for about 2 years, and then Felix was replaced as governor by a man named Porcius Festus. So the new governor wanted to hear from this man who was tearing the country apart, so he invited Paul back to hear his story. And in that encounter, Paul, who was of Jewish extraction, who was a Roman citizen, he exercised his right to appeal to Caesar, the Roman emperor, to hear his trial. And so he said, I appeal to Caesar. And so they sent him to Rome, which parenthetically, about a month ago, my wife and I stood right near the place in Rome where they believed the Apostle Paul was to be hidden. Those are somber moments. Even though you don't know the place for sure, you recognize something pretty significant happened in this place. And so on their way to Italy to go to Rome, Paul and his whole company were under the command of a Roman centurion. That's an officer in charge of 100 men. His name was Julius. He was very favorably inclined toward Paul, and the ship stopped at a place called Sidon. And in that place, Julius allowed Paul to go and visit with his friends, even who lived there. They traveled on. This, of course, was sailing vessel days. The trip was slow, and the winds were contrary much of the way. And finally, they arrived in the autumn at a place called Fair Haven. Paul suggested that they winter there because it was past the autumn solstice, but the commander of the ship yielded to pressure that was coming from the owner of the ship and others to keep going, and so they did, hoping to spend the winter at a place called Phoenix, which is on the island of Crete, and so they left. They set sail, the Bible tells us, under a gentle breeze, but it soon turned to hurricane-force winds, a nor'easter, and seeking to lighten the ship as the cargo overboard, but it didn't help them. They took ropes and suspended them down over the ship and trussed up her hull to try to keep her from falling apart and to hold her together temporarily. And in the midst of all this confusion, more than once Paul said to the assembled crew, don't lose courage, don't lose courage. Even when it looks bad and you think you might sink, don't lose courage. The Bible says the storm lasted for 2 weeks. Finally it began to abate, and the ship was blown into shallow water. The crew brought anchors off the stern, hoping to keep her from being driven ashore, but actually she struck a sandbar, and the crew really had no idea where they were. Some of the crew tried to abandon the ship and leave the rest prevented by doing so from the captain, and there were 276 people on board this ship that had just hit the sandbar. After eating a meal on the 15th day of their journey, the storm, they threw all the remaining grain overboard, and the soldiers then wanted to kill the prisoners, but Julius, the commander, did not allow them to do so, and all hands abandoned ship, all 276 people. The Bible says the swimmers left first and made it to shore, followed by the others who were holding on to planks and crates and debris of one kind or another as the ship was breaking up. And all 276 arrived safe on the shore. No one was drowned. No one's lives were lost. They were safe and sound, but soggy and shaken on the shores of a strange and unknown place. And the Bible says, once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining. And if a church is functioning as a New Testament church should, if Hillside Wesleyan is functioning as a New Testament church should, it will encounter people whose realities of life will very much parallel the shipwrecked 276 people on the beach of St. Paul's Bay. Not suffering from a literal shipwreck, I don't mean perhaps, but with lives that are facing incredible challenges and major disruptions at various levels. If a church, if Hillside is functioning as a New Testament church should, it will have people like these shipwrecked 276 who will seek refuge and relationship and safety and solution right here on your shores. If a church is functioning as a New Testament church should, if Hillside is, those seeking refuge and relationship and safety and solution, when they land on your shores, will be treated, as has been your 35-year history, will be treated by the high standards that the residents of Malta treated the shipwrecked 276 that showed up on their shore. And these Maltese people, they left us a model, really, for local ministry that I just want to leave you with in these closing few minutes. A desire to see in action in any church I ever encountered in my own life, and of course, here. Paul's own words that I read a moment ago describe what the Maltese did with faith for the unexpected challenge of finding 276 people in their front dooryard, none of whom they had invited or had they expected them to be there. Once we were safe on shore, we learned that we were on the island of Malta. The people of the island were very kind to us. It was raining and cold, so they built a fire with the King James as a wonderful expression. They kindled them a fire. They built a fire on the shore and welcomed us and warmed us. 2 or 3 quick thoughts. They welcomed strangers. They did not shun them. Said they showed them unusual kindness. 276 people who were total strangers to them, whom they did not expect, and there they were, strangers. But they showed them unusual kindness. They welcomed strangers. They did not shun them. There's awkwardness sometimes and even fear when in a strange place among people who are strangers. It happens around churches. It just does. If you want to feel it, go to church some Sunday you've never attended in your life and try to figure out when you walk in the front door, am I glad to be here or not? Or are they glad I'm here or not? It's that sort of sense of something. Way back in 1976, when I was still young, way back in 1976, I was invited to serve on the Investment Foundation Board for our denomination, and I was young, relatively speaking, and went to the first meeting with fear and trepidation. I only knew one other person in the room, and I was junior and green in every way in denominational life at that point in time. And there was a man on that board, his name was George Walquist. He was a layman from the state of Iowa. I'd never met him before. He was an old guy, then about 60. Amazing how your perspective changes on this. By the way, you know what middle age is? 10 years old, whatever you are. So middle age for me now is in